Exile+Space+Divine Doctor+Female Qiang+Shuangwen+Sweet Pet+Vest, the special agent Yan Ruyu slept until ancient times and had to go and marry for her. What's even worse is that before the sedan chair lands, the husband's family will be raided and exiled. Yan Ruyu discovered that her missing husband was actually a benefactor of her ancestors. With her violent temper, how could she see her benefactor being humiliated? Copying home, right. Okay, all supplies are stored in the space. Cut off the father-daughter relationship, right. Okay, cut off the book and let me write it. In the future, you will kneel down and beg me. Assault on the road of exile, right. Okay, dig a pit for you, bury one by one. White Lotus loves to cry and pretends to be weak, right. Okay, punch to the flesh, palm to palm, cry enough. As for the prince and husband wearing countless vests, Yan Ruyu said. I won't say anything, just watch you act. The border war broke out again, and the emperor issued an edict overnight. Changhe frowned and sneered, others don't count, you have to listen to my wife. Chapter 1. Marriage of the Queen. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Yan Ruyu was sleeping soundly when suddenly someone rudely shook her and said, Don't sleep. The wedding procession is approaching, hurry up and get on the wedding sedan chair. In order to carry out the previous task, Yan Ruyu stayed awake for almost 3 days and nights. She had just fallen asleep when she was shaken awake, naturally emitting a wave of waking up energy. She didn't open her eyes, so she grabbed and shook her hand, flipped it over and pressed the person's back onto the bed. Illegal intrusion into the house, are you wanting to see the police, uncle? The maid who was pinned on the bed screamed in pain, Wild Seed, let go of me, kill someone. Help. Wild Seed. Yan Ruyu gave a cold smile and was about to break the man's wrist when she was surprised to find that the woman was wearing a dress in ancient costume. She was taken aback, lifted her head, and looked around. An even more terrifying thing happened. This is not her apartment in CBD, but an antique room. The bed is like a stepping bed in a small house, with a dressing table next to it, which is also carved rosewood. Where is this? Why did she suddenly come here? The maid continued to curse, Wild Seed, let go of me. You shameless Wild Seed. Don't think that marrying the Prince of Jinan will make you a queen. I tell you, you will die even if you go to the prince's mansion in Jinan. Jinan Wang. A very familiar name. At this moment, a string of memories that did not belong to her flooded into her mind. She had traveled through time and space, back over 1,000 years to the Li dynasty, dressed as the illegitimate daughter of a military minister, about to marry the Prince of Jinan. This is not what shocked her the most. What shocked her was that in modern Yan family teachings, she said that over 1,000 years ago, a king of Jinan saved the ancestors of the Yan family, which allowed the Yan family to continue and develop. The person who saved the ancestors of the Yan family was none other than the Jinan king of the Li dynasty. Did she travel back to the era of family benefactors? If according to modern information, shortly after saving his ancestors, the king of Jinan was falsely accused of colluding with the enemy in betraying the country, committing theft and exile, and the king of Jinan also went missing. Outside the room, someone heard the maid shout and hurried in. Everyone was also surprised and said, let go. Bold bastard. Yan Ruyu glanced at everyone and with a click, she broke the maid's wrist. Not broken, but directly broken. Even if she recovered, it would never be the same as before. This doesn't even count. Wearing a phoenix crown, Xia was greeted by the screams of a maid from the ground, and slowly stood up with a cruel smile on her lips. Who called you a bastard just now? Come and queue up, let me see what you can do. Don't be cowardly, if you're cowardly now, you're not even a bastard. Everyone was both scared and angry, but they also knew that the prince's mansion in Jinan was likely to steal the family, and whoever married them would die. So, the eldest daughter didn't want to get married and asked this illegitimate daughter to marry. Li Mama stepped forward with a sinister expression and forced out some flattery. Miss, calm down. Today is your big day, don't argue with these dog slaves. Hurry up and get on the wedding sedan. If you miss the auspicious time, it won't be good. The Jinan Prince's mansion is different from our mansion in terms of titles. Miss, it's better to be cautious. Yan Ruyu had no intention of competing with these dog slaves. What she needs to do is to quickly go to the prince's mansion in Jinan to see the situation. She cannot let the family's benefactors suffer. Thinking about it, he put on the cover and got on the sedan chair. Quickly, the sedan chair was lifted up in a hurry, and the sedan chair driver walked quickly, as if he also vaguely knew that something big was about to happen. Inside the sedan chair, Yan Ruyu, holding the apple, thought carefully. The ancestors of the Yan family had spatial abilities back then, so they were treated as monsters and burned to death. It was the king of Jinan who intervened to save the Yan family that allowed them to continue. The power of the Yan family is only randomly passed down to one heir per generation. In her generation, it was passed down to her. And she took over from her father and joined the supernatural action group, specializing in tasks that normal people cannot do. How is she going to save the Prince of Jinan and the prince's mansion? Entering the palace to assassinate the emperor. I'm afraid it's too late. From the sedan chair driver's footsteps, it can be seen that the situation is already very urgent. Suddenly, Yan Ruyu had a sudden inspiration. Yes. Stealing the house means confiscating the property of the Jinan prince's mansion, exile. The officials will not take the prisoner's life along the way. If the prisoner has money, the journey will also be very comfortable. Silver. Property. Yan Ruyu knows what she should do. It took about a stick of incense to arrive at the prince's mansion in Jinan. Sure enough, something happened. Before she could even get off the sedan chair, Yan Ruyu heard the noise outside, the screams of women, and the loud debates of men. The sedan chair driver threw down the sedan chair and ran away, and no one cared about the bride inside the sedan chair anymore. And Yan Ruyu rudely pulled off the red cap and phoenix crown, stuffed them into her personal space, quickly took off her red robe, put on the ordinary dress that had just come out of the room, and jumped out of the wedding sedan. In the panicked crowd, like a nimble fish, running towards the direction of the accounting room. Yan Ruyu is a supernatural agent in modern times and requires a lot of knowledge, including this type of Jiangnan garden design. I have a good understanding of the layout of the opposite facade. She is now going to the accounting room. In ancient times, all household assets were in the accounting room, and many accounting rooms also had a basement to store belongings. When they arrived at the accounting room, they saw two other accounting gentlemen in the room. When they saw Yan Ruyu, they were surprised and asked her identity. Without saying a word, Yan Ruyu knocked the accountant unconscious with two hand knives. Found the basement, but there is a lock on it. She took out the last few tiny explosives from the space and placed them on the lock. With an explosion, the basement door lock was blown open. Jump down from the basement and start crazily packing silver coins. Whether it's silver, gold and silver jewelry, silk and satin, as long as you see them, you crazily pack them into space. She didn't climb out of the basement until it was cleaned up. And as soon as she left, she could vaguely hear the officers and soldiers rushing to the basement, preparing to search. Yan Ruyu gave a cold smile. Go ahead and pounce. Immediately after, she ran to the main courtyard to search for the property in the master's room. Chapter 2. Exile. The material collection is non-stop. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As soon as I entered the room of Jinan Wang, a familiar feeling rushed towards me. Yan Ruyu remembers that in her grandfather's half-precious picture book, there was a picture of the room of the Prince of Jinan. According to the record in the picture, in addition to property, there is also the small study in the room where all military documents, letters, seals, etc. are collected. There is also a hidden compartment under the desk. Yan Ruyu took out a small box and collected it, restoring the dark space to its original state. Having only gold, silver, and treasures may not be suitable. Exile is a long journey, and sometimes one even needs to camp in the wilderness. There are some things that money cannot buy, so one still needs to prepare some food. Arriving at the kitchen, there were several delivery carts parked outside the door, filled with fresh vegetables, as well as chickens and ducks. Yan Ruyu waved her hand and took them all away. There is a happy event in the mansion today. Originally, we were planning to set up a banquet, but the kitchen had already been prepared with all the food and drinks. However, when the incident suddenly occurred, the chefs received news and fled in panic. At this moment, there was no one left, only a pile of food. This happened to be convenient for Yan Ruyu. With all her busy work, she kept everything clean and didn't even leave behind the nearby granary and wine storage. Looking at the wedding banquets received, I realized that the Yan family had put in a lot of effort to facilitate this marriage by having their legitimate daughter marry over to become a queen. Yan Shilang waved flags and shouted for the royal family every day, but when it was said that something was wrong, they didn't show their heads and their legitimate daughter didn't marry either. Yan Ruyu's heart was cold and gloomy. Why should the Wang mansion be raided, but the Yan family be able to stay out of it? Since the Yan family is not a good thing, then don't think it's easy. Why not go back to Yan's mansion to search while the situation is chaotic? Determined, she found the stable, mounted her horse, and headed straight for Yan mansion. There are quite a few treasures stored in the warehouse of Yan mansion, but she was married into the Wang mansion without any dowry. Now she is not polite, she can put on anything she sees, such as gold, silver, silk, medicinal herbs, and antiques. The warehouse was completely looted, and just as we were about to leave, we heard Lady Yan whispering through the moonlit door, "Master, this is a rare opportunity. It's a pity that I took the opportunity to draw a clear line with the Jinan prince's mansion and let the emperor know our loyalty. It's just a pity for that child, Ruyu, who calls her surname Yan. Let's make some contributions to our family. Then I'll go deliver something to her later. How can a girl like her bear this long journey? No need. I just said I need to draw a clear line, and from today on, I will consider myself without this daughter." Yan Ruyu sneered silently. "Alright, you're not kind, don't blame me for being unjust." She turned around and went to Cheap Dad's study, opened the darkroom. This was considered Yan Shilang's private library, and even Lady Yan didn't know. If it weren't for hearing the heartless words, she almost wouldn't have remembered. Take away gold, silver, jewelry, jade artifacts, and antiques, as well as a securely locked box. I went to the courtyard where Mrs. Yan and others lived again, but I didn't let go of any jewelry boxes or antique boxes. I originally wanted to go to places like granaries to take a look, but it's not too early to delay for too long, so as not to cause any further trouble in the royal mansion. The prince is not here, she needs to protect his family from harm. With this in mind, she left the Yan mansion through the back door and rushed towards the Wang mansion with great speed. As soon as we arrived at the intersection, we saw many soldiers standing in front of the door. The group of people who were stealing homes had arrived. Yan Ruyu quickly entered the royal mansion through the small door. Just as she had tied up her horse, she had not had time to catch her breath when she heard the increasing noise and scolding in front of her. In just a short amount of time, the front yard had become a mess, with things being trampled on everywhere. The female relatives and masters of each courtyard in the royal mansion were brought here, with mixed cries and cries. In addition to the imperial guards, there was also a group of people. Yan Ruyu recognized at a glance that the leader of the group was Yan Song, the illegitimate eldest son of her cheap father, the Minister of War. It can be said that plagiarism is not a matter of the Ministry of War. It seems that this is the way that the Yan family came up with to draw a clear line with the royal family. Yan Song pointed his knife at Madame Hua and said, "You. Tell me, where have all the treasures of the royal family gone?" Madame Hua's face was pale and her waist was straight. I don't know, she said, I don't know. Yan Song sneered, according to the emperor's decree, your son Hua Changhe is proud of his achievements and intends to rebel. He disappeared after the war and his whereabouts are unknown. This is a punishment from heaven. The emperor is kind, considering that he has also made some contributions in the past. The female relatives will not hold you accountable, only allowing you to be exiled to the northwest. Daring to hide property now is truly a crime that cannot be punished. Upon hearing these words, the women cried even more sadly. In the northwest, the desert is desolate, and not to mention that there are no people living there. It's hard to say whether these people can walk to it or not. Madame Hua shook her body slightly and said, I don't know what kind of property, let alone hide it. If you come to steal the house, just copy it. Yan Song took a step forward, the tip of his knife pressed against Mrs. Hua's collar, slid down, and cut open a button. This button is also pearl and cannot be taken away. Are you saying it or not? If you don't say it, then. How dare you be rude to my mother? A little boy rushed over and stood in front of the big lady's leg, his eyes fierce like a little wolf. My big brother can't spare you when he comes back. Your elder brother can't come back. Yan Song lowered his sword and slashed at the little boy, while the women covered their faces and exclaimed in surprise. Ah! Screamed in agony. Everyone looked up and saw that Yan Song's knife was snatched by Yan Ruyu. Yan Song's arm was powerless and had already broken, saying, Yan Ruyu, are you crazy? How could you hit me? Yan Ruyu's sharp knife cut open his entire garment, even his inner garment, and a few blood droplets rolled out of his white belly. Your button is not a pearl, it's not worth any money. Yan Ruyu's pitch-black eyes were cold and gloomy. Yan Song, the emperor asked you to plagiarize your family and mercifully let us women go. What are you? How dare you humiliate my mother? In law. You. Yan Ruyu's blade pressed against Yan Song's throat and said, what should I do? If I dare to have bad intentions, I'll kill you first. Anyway, I'm going to be exiled now, and I'm not afraid of anything. Yan Song gritted his teeth, secretly surprised that Yan Ruyu, who had always been timid, seemed to have suddenly changed her personality. At this very moment, the searchers returned. The main courtyard has nothing. There's no study either. There's no kitchen either. Yan Song's forehead bulging with bulging veins. Nothing. What did he copy from home? It's simply unreasonable. However, there was still a knife lying horizontally around his neck. He took a deep breath and stared at Yan Ruyu, saying, okay, I'll go search. You can change your clothes, as long as you follow the rules, I won't make things difficult for you. Yan Ruyu sneered and let go of him. He took 2 steps back and ordered, look at them, carefully inspect them, no precious jewelry is allowed to be taken away. He turned around and went elsewhere. This time, more important than property, was evidence of Hua Changhe's rebellion. Madame Hua let out a soft breath and looked at Yan Ruyu while holding the child. Thank you very much. At this moment it was supposed to be a joyful occasion, but unexpectedly, in the blink of an eye, the joyous event turned into this. Madame Hua really didn't know what to say. Mother, there's no need to be polite. Since I married the prince, I will definitely take care of you on his behalf. Don't worry, I won't leave you behind. Without time to say a few more words, Yan Song came to rush people to the northwest. He was one of the officers responsible for escorting prisoners. With one hand clenching the whip, Yan Song's sinister gaze swept over Yan Ruyu. This trip will definitely make you die on the road. Chapter 3. I do not recognize this dad. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The gate of the once prominent Jinan prince's mansion slammed shut with a loud bang, with white seals crisscrossing like 2 sharp blades, merciless and satirical. Dozens of people, dressed in coarse linen, were driven out of the city by the soldiers in a grand manner. Observing the people whispering, the king of Jinan has made many military achievements. I heard that he also won this battle, and I had originally planned to wait for him to triumph. How could this suddenly happen? Suddenly, someone in the crowd shouted, "Pooh! What kind of Jinan king is just a traitor seeking glory? That's it, damn it." Soon, emotions were stirred up, more and more insults were heard, and some people began to throw away junk food. Madame Huo closed her eyes slightly, and her youngest son was beside her. "Mother, my elder brother has clearly protected them. Why do they curse us?" "Hunger, don't be afraid. Those who are pure will be self-righteous. Let them curse, and there will always be times when they apologize to us." Ha! Half a brick was mixed in rotten vegetable leaves and smashed at Madame Huo. Bang! Yan Ruyu punched her and smashed it directly. Everyone around was surprised, and Mrs. Huo's face became even paler. If such a big brick hit her, it would cause her to suffer a head injury and bleeding on the spot. Yan Ruyu cast her gaze like a knife, brushing past the direction of the brick and saying, "Who is it? Stand up." No one answered. Yan Ruyu clenched the broken bricks tightly, and the brick powder rustled down. "I'll ask again, who is it? Stand up for yourself." The onlookers were frightened by Yan Ruyu's ferocity and unconsciously took a few steps back. Madame Huo whispered, "Forget it." "Mother," Yan Ruyu said with a resounding voice, "we can never forget it. The emperor's decree is exile, but it does not allow anyone to engage in lynching. Even if our Jinan prince's mansion falls, our spirit cannot be destroyed, our backbone cannot be lost, and we will not be bullied at will." As the words fell, someone in the crowd stepped back and turned to leave. Yan Ruyu kicked with her toes and a piece of broken brick flew up, hitting the back of the person's head. The person let out a muffled groan, touched it, and picked up a big bag. Just as she was about to turn around, Yan Ruyu followed with a swift step, dragging his neck to the side of the road and landing on the ground, stepping on it. "Tell me, who sent you here?" That person was wearing a round-necked brocade robe and thin-soled fast boots, clearly not an ordinary person. "Let go of me, no one sent me here. I can't stand the traitors like the king of Jinan. I asked you to curse." Yan Ruyu punched him in the face. "Whoa!" The person covered their mouth in pain, pressed their tongue, and 2 teeth fell out. With a dang sound, a waist tag fell out of his sleeve. Before he could pick it up, it had already been preempted by Yan Ruyu. Iwang Mansion, Yan Ruyu sneered, turned out to be a dog servant. "You." Upon hearing the news, Yan Song came from the front of the team, holding a bandage in one hand and a whip in the other, pointing at Yan Ruyu and saying, "What are you doing? Let go of him." After speaking, the whip swung fiercely over. Yan Ruyu grabbed her and looked straight at Yan Song. "What's going on? Let me let you go without asking. Is that difficult? Are you also a dog servant? Yan Ruyu, are you crazy? You haven't figured out your situation yet, have you?" Yan Song held his whip tightly, feeling angry in his heart. When did Yan Ruyu become so bold and vigorous? Yan Ruyu snorted and said, "What situation is it? It's just exile, my aunt is just playing around the mountains and rivers. Someone intended to harm someone before leaving the capital. As an escort officer, can you escape any involvement in the actual incident? I'm trying to save you, idiot." Bold. Yan Song was so angry that he wanted to curse, and once again he struggled to retrieve the whip. Unexpectedly, Yan Ruyu let go of his hand. He exerted too much force and almost flipped off his horse, finally stabilizing himself. His arm, which had just been fixed on the bone, felt a pang of heartache. He stared fiercely at Yan Ruyu, but Yan Ruyu stopped looking at him and patted the servant's face with his waist tag, saying, "Go back and tell the dog master that we will meet later." As he spoke, he exerted force on his toes, causing the servant to plead for mercy in pain. The servant crawled away and Yan Ruyu returned to Madame Huo's side, saying, "Mother, are you okay?" Madame Hua had mixed feelings in her heart and shook her head, saying, "It's okay, you. How are you?" "I'm fine, don't worry." Madame Hua forced a smile and didn't know how to deal with this completely unfamiliar daughter.In. Law. She couldn't say she liked her, but they did protect her and her young son. "Let's go and see. What she's most worried about now is the missing Changhe." Yan Ruyu felt Mrs. Hua's attitude and did not demand it. Anyway, she was doing her best for the sake of the Prince of Jinan, and had a clear conscience. Finally leaving the city, there were a few scattered carriages waiting by the roadside, all of whom came to bid farewell. Exile is a crime that cannot be committed to death. As long as it is well managed, family members are still allowed to send them off, including some clothes and food, some silver coins hidden, and escorting officials on the way. These are all rules. Therefore, the escort officers also turned a blind eye, as most of the money also flowed into their wallets. Hua Changhe and his family are the wealthy families of the Hua family. His father, whose parents died at a young age, grew up with his uncle. When he was young, he went out to make a living and met Lady Hua. Madame Hua is also the only daughter in the family. Not long after marrying into the Hua family, her parents also passed away one after another. Therefore, no one came to see them off in this room. The wife of the second and third bedrooms, who came from her family, gave some gifts and tearfully parted ways with her family, making their room particularly lonely. Yan Ruyu didn't know how to comfort the madam's expression. Madame Hua, holding her young son, suddenly said to Yan Ruyu, "Look, is that the carriage of the Yan family?" Yan Ruyu looked over and indeed saw a carriage arriving late. The people who got off the carriage were dressed up as maids. They first bowed to Yan Song and then walked towards Yan Ruyu with their heads and chests high. "She is empty-handed, obviously not here to deliver anything." Yan Ruyu, as adults have said, the Yan family does not have a daughter like you. You have left Beijing this time and there is no possibility of returning. In the future, the Yan family and you will have no further involvement, and they have nothing to do with each other. There was a silence all around, and my eyes looked at Yan Ruyu from different angles. Yan Song's mouth slightly curled up, waiting to see the good play. Yan Ruyu looked at this maid and remembered that it was the big maid next to Miss Yan. The maid pursed her lips and took out a few copper coins from her sleeve, saying, "Our big and small sisters are kind-hearted. We'll give you a few copper coins, enough for you to buy some wild vegetables to eat." Wow, the copper plate spilled all over the ground. Yan Ruyu's gaze instantly turned cold and she saw a jade bracelet on her wrist. This maid used to bully the original owner and take her belongings as her own. Yan Ruyu grabbed the maid's wrist and forcefully withdrew the jade bracelet. The maid had a big hand and had to put it on with great effort. Now she was torn off and screamed in pain, but couldn't break free. With the jade bracelet in hand, Yan Ruyu loosened her fingertips and said, "What are you calling for?" "Now, the things are back to their original owners, and I am the final say of my things." She stepped on it and the jade bracelet broke into two pieces. One of them was under her feet, grinding, and a slight piercing sound was detected. The maid was shocked and said, "You." Yan Ruyu picked up the intact half, stuffed it into her arms, and patted it. "Take it, this jade slag is enough for you to drink wild vegetable congee on the roadside for a month." Also, Yan Ruyu pulled off a piece of skirt hem, bit her finger, and wrote a few lines with a swish. "Go back and tell Yan Sherlang, it's not that he doesn't think I'm the daughter, it's that I don't recognize his father, I don't recognize the Yan family. I and the Yan family, cut ties and sever ties." Chapter 4. Even if the sky collapses, you have to give me a head up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The maid was stunned, and Yan Song sneered on horseback. "What are you still waiting for? Go back and report to your father, so that the whole family knows about the bold words of our queen." He paused and sarcastically added, "Oh, I forgot. I even lost the Jinan prince's mansion. Where did you get the queen? Yes, I'll go back now, the maid Fufu said, I'll explain it to the adults in detail. The maid got on the carriage and left, while the rest of the Huo family stared at Yan Ruyu with different eyes. The second wife hugged the bundle tightly in her arms and pursed her lips, saying, some people just want to climb the high branch, but now not only has the high branch not climbed up, but there is also no way out. TSK, it's really unlucky. The daughter.in.law of the second wife is her own niece, who has always held her in her arms. Upon hearing this, she agreed, it doesn't matter if she's unlucky herself, don't burden others. We're doing well. When she comes, she's both a thief and an exile. I think she's just a reincarnation of a malevolent star who came specifically to harm us originally. The Huo family was filled with sadness, feeling that their fate was unfair and they were implicated for no reason. Now, upon hearing her say this, they immediately turned their anger towards Yan Ruyu. No wonder, as soon as the sedan chair landed, something happened in the mansion. It seems that her evil energy is really not average. If not, how could her family break ties with her? She is Yan Shilang's illegitimate daughter and has not been recognized back in the mansion. Perhaps it's because she is a malevolent star, right? The Yan family is actually smart, isn't this making us bear the blame? A stone stirred up 1,000 waves, and dozens of people's voices grew louder and their anger grew stronger. Madame Hua's chest was blocked and she said, all right, what's all this nonsense? We're a family now, and we should work together to overcome difficulties. Sister-in-law, that's not what you're saying, said the second wife, who is always sharp-tongued. Although we all have the surname Huo, we usually live our lives in peace and our duties are our own. We don't know what your room is doing. Well done, misfortune comes from heaven, don't you allow us to talk about it, you. Yan Ruyu dug out her ear and said, you don't know what we've done in this room, but you've all followed in the glory earned by my prince. When you receive benefits, why don't you say to be obedient, live your life according to your duty, and don't say anything? What's going on? Now that the prince has been wrongly accused, are you thinking of pushing yourself away? I tell you, there's no way. Disaster comes from heaven, you have to take it on me one by one. A tall one collapsed and a small one pushed me up. When will you take off the benefits of my prince's contact with me, spit out what you eat, and then lick your face and say something else to me, you're really vulgar. Sister-in-law, you don't care either. Second lady instigated on the side. Madame Hua's tone, which was blocked by Yan Ruyu's scolding, dissipated in half. What's the point of being vulgar? It's better than being a refined scumbag. All right, said the old man from the Yan family in a deep voice, keep your mouth shut. He cast a deep glance at Yan Ruyu, who ignored him directly. Yan Song swung his whip and said, everyone, take big strides. If anyone dares to be lazy and slippery, don't blame my whip for being ruthless. His gaze was fierce, like a venomous snake, staring at Yan Ruyu. Look at how long you can be horizontal, no matter how female you are, you can't bear to walk a few miles, and then you should taste the taste of the whip. Yan Ruyu ignored everyone else and only cared about Madame Hua and her younger brother Hua Changhe. Let me carry you on my back, Yan Ruyu said. Hua Changhe's small face tightened and his expression was resolute, no need, I can walk on my own. Okay, call me when you can't walk. Madame pursed her lips and comforted her in a low voice, don't be too sad either. The Yan family is just afraid of being implicated, and they are also a big family. When Changhe comes back and washes away his grievances, everything will be fine. Yan Ruyu smiled nonchalantly and said, I'm not sad. I don't have much affection for the Yan family in the first place, and there's no difference in continuity. Madame choked. After a moment of silence, he abruptly changed the topic and said, if we walk about 10 miles ahead, it will be Biayuan, which must have been sealed off as well. Hua Changhe raised his small face and said, Mother, will you be able to see my second brother soon? Huo Ergong was not satisfied with his elder brother's marriage to the Yan family's daughter, so a few days ago he blocked his anger and went to live in another garden. Madame Huo glanced at her jade-like appearance and nodded, "Yes, your second brother is waiting for us in front." She was a bit worried, not sure if her second son's temperament would cause any discord with Yan Ruyu. Yan Ruyu didn't take it to heart. She was pondering and recalling where the Prince of Zhenan, Changhe, had gone. Unfortunately, the events back then were all passed down by word of mouth without much record, and there was nothing left for her. She only knew that the Prince of Zhenan had not rebelled and had been harmed. Who could it be? She touched the token in her arms. Could it be the Wing King? Otherwise, why would he let someone harm the madam? Even if it's not him, sending someone to take advantage of the chaos and attack women is not a good idea. "Sir, let's take a break. Someone can't walk anymore, crying for mercy." Yan Ruyu withdrew her thoughts and saw that she was the daughter-in-law of the second wife. She just said she was the one from the malevolent star. Just take a glance and don't look away, she's too lazy to pay attention. What are you taking a break for? How far have you just walked? Yen Song swung his whip mercilessly, "Hurry up." The whip stirred up dust, and a sharp cry echoed everywhere. The restlessness in the crowd was amplified and suppressed, and some couldn't help but cry. Yan Ruyu turns a deaf ear. What's the use of crying? Tears are really useless at all. They walked out of the capital, and three figures took advantage of the chaos and jumped into the palace through the back door, heading straight to the king's study in Zhenan. The study was empty, with nothing on the desk, bookshelf, or wall. The person who entered the room paused in their footsteps, and this copy of the house was a bit too clean. However, after a moment of hesitation, he quickly opened the hidden compartment under the table and touched it with his hand. His face suddenly darkened. The thing is gone. He carefully examined the hidden mechanism and found no signs of damage. How could this be possible? Opening the dark grid requires special techniques, and if it is not broken, it cannot be opened. He looked up again and looked around, feeling that the plagiarism was not quite right this time. At this moment, there were hurried footsteps outside. "Master, there's nothing left in the private warehouse over there in the accounting room." He nodded, which was not surprising. The subordinate added, "I don't even have a small cart pushing silver in the corner, including the wheels that I replaced before." He slowly pulled off the masked black cloth, revealing his resolute and handsome face. "What?" My subordinate rubbed his stomach and said, "I'm a bit hungry. I just passed by the kitchen and didn't even have a bite of soup. These damn people, how could they be so picky?" Changhe furrowed his brows slightly, feeling that this was somewhat strange. "Do I need you to accept Chapter 5? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mother, it's my second brother." Changhe saw the person on the roadside ahead and loudly said to Madame Huo, "There's also Sister Xianzhao." Yan Ruyu looked up and saw a small group of officers and soldiers in front, escorting three people, one man and two women. The man must be the second son of the Huo family, the second younger brother of the Zhenan king Changhe, and as for the woman, she squinted her eyes slightly, and some unpleasant memories of the original owner came to mind. Two people met, and the second young master approached Madame Huo and said, "Mother, are you okay?" "It's okay, how are you?" Madame pulled him up and down and looked at him. "Didn't it hurt, did it?" "No," second young master shook his head. "Mother, what's going on? How could Big Brother betray his country? What about others?" "I haven't found it yet," Madame lowered her voice. "This is not the time to speak. Xianzhao, what's wrong with you?" The two women were one master and one servant. Before Wan Xianzhao could speak, the maid next to her said, "Madam, I just heard that the prince has an accident. Miss is anxious and twisted her foot." Madame's face slightly changed. Spraining her foot is a big trouble at the moment. "Auntie, I'm fine, don't worry." Wan Xianzhao was pitiful, brother Changhe. The eldest lady held her hand and said, I've implicated you. I'll go talk to the officials. You're not from the Huo family, maybe they can let you go. Mother, the second young master's face looked unpleasant, it's useless. I've said it before, but they don't agree. Everyone in the capital knows that Xianzhao is our cousin who has been raised in the Wang mansion for several years, just like Miss Wang mansion. Madam sighed slightly and said, it was all good intentions back then, but I didn't expect to harm you today. Xianzhao, this. What did my aunt say? If it weren't for your consideration of my mother's face and willingness to take care of me, I would have died a long time ago. How can I let go of the difficulties in the royal mansion now? Besides, I have to wait for brother Changhe to come back and see him safe with my own eyes before I can rest assured. After Wan Xianzhao finished speaking, his gaze turned to Yan Ruyu, as if he had just discovered her. This is. Yan Ruyu was more than 1 meter ahead of them. Upon hearing this, she turned to look at her and said, I am your brother Changhe's wife. Wan Xianzhao. The second young master looked surprised and said, Mother, who is she? He once secretly went to the jewelry store and met Miss Yan, who was delicate and affected, but at least she looked like a wealthy woman. Not like this person in front of me, who is shooting stars with big strides, his eyes cold and sharp, and his tone cold and hard. He doesn't look like a lady from a wealthy family at all. Besides, the appearance doesn't match. She is the new sister.in.law, what Changhe said crudely. The new sister.in.law is very powerful and can even beat people. What? The second young master was even more shocked. Madame Huo looked at Yan Ruyu's upright figure and lowered her voice, let's talk about this later. How can we wait? Mother, this matter is related to Big Brother's marriage. Originally, the Yan family snatched Xianzhao's position, but now another one has emerged. How do you want me to accept it? Without waiting for the eldest lady to respond, the second young master strode forward and called out to Yan Ruyu, stop. Yan Ruyu didn't turn her head back and didn't bother to talk to him. The second young master was furious and caught up with her to block her, saying, I'm asking you, who are you? It should be Miss Yan from the Yan family, why are you? Yan Ruyu looked at him up close and saw his appearance clearly. He was a young man of 18 or 19 years old, handsome and elegant. Even if he changed into coarse cloth clothes, it was difficult to conceal his noble pride. Unfortunately, my brain is not very bright and I have not been subjected to social abuse. Now they are in the latter half of the team and have already distanced themselves from the front. Yan Ruyu's corner of the eye caught a glimpse of Yan Song, who was looking towards them. She took a slight step and said, as I mentioned earlier, I am the wife of Huo Changhe. I don't accept it, said the second young master angrily. Oh, Yan Ruyu chuckled briefly, he didn't say anything himself. Who are you old enough? I need you to accept it. Second young master, right. I want to show off and go with those officers and soldiers, so that they can listen to you. I admire you as a hero, and you can also make my mother and younger brother suffer less on the road. If you don't have this ability, then follow along obediently and put away the prestige of your second prince in the royal mansion. You are simply unreasonable. How can someone like you deserve to marry my elder brother? The second young master's face turned red with anger. It's not up to you to decide whether you deserve it or not. To be honest, if I were to marry you, I wouldn't agree, Yan Ruyu sneered. When is it now? Exile. Your elder brother's whereabouts are unknown, and your life and death are uncertain. You still have free time to talk about matters of love between children and daughters. It doesn't really matter. Yan Ruyu pushed him and said, go away. When you can live to the northwest, come and argue with me. It's not too late. Ha. Yan Song swung a whip over. He originally intended to whip Yan Ruyu, but the second young master was pushed by Yan Ruyu and happened to block the whip. The whip hit the second young master's shoulder, and the tip of the whip swept over his cheek, causing a bloodstain to appear on his beautiful face. The second young master gritted his teeth in pain, but restrained himself from shouting. Yan Song withdrew his whip and said, "Hurry up and leave, don't cause any trouble. Whoever doesn't listen will speak towards my whip." "Yan Song, dare you?" Second young master glared angrily. Yan Song shook his hand and whipped again. "Second young master, you see clearly. Now that I am an official and you are a criminal, why should I not dare?" "You." Madame Huo quickly took a few steps and grabbed second young master. Yan Song's gaze swept over Yan Ruyu, and he hummed as he rode his horse back to the front. "Is everything okay?" Mrs. Huo felt heartbroken. This despicable and shameless person. The second young master gritted his teeth. He always respectfully lowers himself in front of his son. When we were in trouble, he dared to do so. Yan Ruyu's face remained expressionless as she continued to move forward. "This younger brother is not cute at all, so let's take it easy. Since heaven has arranged for her to come here, she not only needs to protect the relatives of the Prince of Shannan, but also has an obligation to teach them how to be human. That whip just now, let's call it the first blow to wake up second young master." Watching the sunset set in the west, a person was looking under the tree at the intersection. "Master, the team has arrived." Changhe changed into coarse cloth clothes, his face changed, and his skin was slightly yellow. Upon hearing this, he looked up the avenue and saw the faint figure, which made his heart ache. "Act according to plan." "Yes." The team finally stopped and rested, and Yan Song rode his horse back and forth, saying, "Listen to me, be honest. Don't try to distort your mind. Who dares to run away? If you break your legs after being caught, even if you run away, all your family members will be killed." Everyone remained silent like a cicada, and no one dared to speak. They each found a place to rest. Yan Songjing ordered his subordinates to set up a tent on a flat ground when three people suddenly arrived on the road. "Official, I would like to visit the account." "Father-in-law, may I ask?" Yan Song looked at the person and saw that he was chubby, dressed in coarse linen, with a silly expression on his face. He impatiently said, "What father-in-law? My father-in-law, he's in the queue." "Please do me a favor," he said as he stuffed an ingot of silver. Yan Song lowered his eyes, and the flesh of the flies was also flesh. He took the silver and ordered, "Hurry up and don't cause any trouble." Yan Ruyu has been following Yan Song all along, and now she also sees those three people. The three of them walked through the crowd and ran towards the accountant. Yan Ruyu's nerves were slightly tense, and the agent's sensitivity told her that these three people were unusual. Chapter 6. Impotence and Fury. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yan Ruyu remained calm as she watched the three of them walk up to the accountant. The chubby man let out a cry, and the accountant looked up at them, a hint of surprise flashing across his face. As a special agent, Yan Ruyu is particularly sensitive to details. Upon closer inspection, the tallest person in the middle has already blocked her view in front of the accounting room. She was pondering when Changhe walked up to her with short legs, quietly tugging at her sleeve and stuffing something into her hand. Looking down, I found it to be a pastry. "Here you are, sister-in-law," said Changhe in her ear in a low voice. Nobody paid attention to me. I took it from the dim sum box quietly and put several pieces on my body. Yan Ruyu felt Microsoft in her heart and touched his head, saying, "Did you eat it?" Changhe shook his head and nodded again. Lying makes the nose grow longer. Yan Ruyu curled her lips slightly, showing a rare smile. Changhe's dark eyes widened and his small hand quickly touched his nose. "Here you are, I'm not hungry," Yan Ruyu returned the dim sum to him. "I have a small stomach and eat less." "Then we should eat more," Yan Ruyu held dim sum to his mouth. "Only when we eat more can we grow faster, and only when we grow up can we protect our mother." Changhe was persuaded and was about to open his mouth to bite when someone behind him shouted, "Even if you want to grab children's things, do you still want to be shameless?" Changhe was startled and quickly turned back, saying, "Second brother, it's not. What's wrong?" Huo picked him up and glared angrily at Yan Ruyu. "You're really good, I knew you didn't have a good heart." Yan Ruyu threw dim sum into her mouth, chewed it slowly, and then got up slowly. "It's delicious. Gongzi. If I'm not well-intentioned, at least I'm not blind and know what's going on." "You." Huo face turned red. "Who do you think is at a loss?" Second cousin, Wan Xianzhao limped over. "Don't be angry. Miss Yan is probably extremely hungry. Let's take care of each other at this time." She smiled at Changhe and said, "Hanger, be good. It's okay. Miss Yan didn't mean to grab your food. Don't be upset, okay? When we arrive in the northwest, I'll make you sugar cakes and drunk duck to eat, okay, cousin, you're just too kind-hearted." "Who's not hungry? Isn't Hanger hungry? If you're hungry, you should grab it." Huo finished speaking with heartache. "You still have a wound on your foot, go rest. I'll ask them for some medicine later." Second cousin, "It's okay with me. Miss, where doesn't matter. Your feet are swollen." The maid glared at her with a jade-like expression. Yan Ruyu hugged her shoulders and tilted her head to look at them, saying, "Have you finished speaking? After speaking, find a place where no one is around to pee and take care of yourself. See what kind of virtue you have now, and do you still have a face? One is blind in his eyes, the other pretends to be good and pretends to be kind-hearted. Those who don't know think you two are a pair." Gongzi's face turned red and he said, "What are you talking nonsense about?" Wan Xianzhao widened her eyes and instantly shed tears. "Miss Yan, you call me princess, the emperor has ordered to steal my family, but I haven't stripped my prince of his rank." Yan Ruyu stepped forward with a teasing smile on her lips. "Don't call me sister-in-law, you don't deserve it." Wan Xianzhao's tears rolled down her face, so pitiful. Huo protected her behind her and said, "Yan Ruyu, who do you think is not worthy? You are the one who is not worthy. You deliberately planned to marry into my family, even snatching Hanger's food. You." "No," Changhe finally found the opportunity to speak. "It wasn't my sister-in-law who snatched me, it was me who gave her food." "Hanger, you've learned to lie, haven't you? You even spoke for her." "Second brother, I'm not lying. Lying will make my nose longer." Changhe covered his nose with a small hand. "What is this and what?" Gongzi still wanted to get angry, but Yan Ruyu snorted and said, "I see you have forgotten the lesson of that whip. Speak louder, summon Yan Song over and beat him up again." Huo gritted his teeth and felt a bit dumbfounded. "So you're not a hero, you only know how to shout at me, a weak woman who's just starting out. What kind of skill is that?" Yan Ruyu's tone was cold and sarcastic, incompetent and furious. "You." "All right," Mrs. Huo walked over quickly, looking tired. "What's going on? It's just that you're not right about this. I asked Hanger to come over. She took Changhe and apologetically said to Yan Ruyu, You've worked hard. Originally. It was originally a good intention, but I didn't expect it to be like this." "Mother, it's none of your business," Yan Ruyu nodded. "You go rest, I'll go get some food later." "That sounds good, where are you going to get it?" Huo snorted. "Are you going? I'll see if you have the ability." At this moment, the officers and soldiers under Yan Song knocked on the iron basin and walked over from the front, saying, "Listen carefully. In half an hour, cook and eat for yourself, and turn off the fire on time. If you want to change something to eat, you should do it as soon as possible, no time for it." "What to exchange for?" "Of course it's money." Huo Ergong twisted his sleeve with his fingers. Yan Ruyu saw it and guessed that there must be something valuable in his sleeve. Mother, Xianzhao, as expected, he whispered, don't worry, I'll go and exchange something to eat. Wan Xianzhao tearfully said, second cousin, go and come back quickly. I'm a bit scared. Okay, don't be afraid. Madame Hua hesitated to say anything. Auntie, let me help you go over and rest. Wan Xianzhao wants to help Madame leave here, so that when the second young master comes back with something to eat, he doesn't have to give it to Yan Ruyu. Stop, Yan Ruyu said, did I let you go? Wan Xianzhao pursed her lips, tears still lingering in her eyes, pitiful. What are you doing? The little maid questioned. Yan Ruyu ignored her directly and stared at Wan Xianzhao, saying, just now you came up and said I robbed Henger's things. Apologize. My young lady is also considerate of the young master, the maid said, lifting her chin. Yan Ruyu slapped her back and said, I'm also worried about your young lady. Teach you a lesson, you ignorant servant. You dare to hit me. The maid looked at her incredulously. Pa, is another one. Did you feel it now? Yan Ruyu adjusted her sleeves, you're such a despicable person. You won't feel it in one go, so you need to do it again. It's good to play symmetrically, I happen to have a bit of OCD. Wan Xianzhao's eyes flashed with astonishment. Ever since she learned that the Yan family intended to marry their daughter to the royal palace, she secretly sent maids to investigate the affairs of the Yan family's young lady. When she saw that the person she married was actually Yan Ruyu, she looked down upon her with all her heart. Miss Yan, who had a rebellious personality, didn't even bother her, let alone this shameless illegitimate daughter. Who would have thought that this illegitimate daughter was so fierce now? It's unreasonable to ask her to apologize again. She pretended to slip under her feet, covered her twisted foot and let out a painful cry, pretending to faint. Mississippi. Yan Ruyu lowered her eyes and slowly rolled up her sleeves, saying, don't worry, I know how to use the technique of mistakenly yellowing. I'll give it a try. The maid refused, but Yan Ruyu refused to accept her trick. She pushed her away and reached out to grab onto the people of Wan Xianzhao. Just as she pinched hard, Wan Xianzhao let out another painful cry. What did I say? I woke up, didn't I? Changhe stood in the distance and glanced at the guards beside him, that's what you said. Timid and cowardly. Chapter 7. Mutual Suspicion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Changhe looked at Yan Ruyu, lost in thought. According to the accountant, Yan Ruyu had been to the accountant before and even knocked him unconscious with a knife. Moreover, the imperial guards who copied Holmes did not find anything, let alone silver. Did Yan Ruyu take the silver? No, it's not right. The prince's mansion has a lot of silver, and Yan Ruyu is a woman. He turned his gaze to Yan Song at the forefront of the team. The sunset had already set, and it was pitch black. Yan Song sat in the shadows, a blurry shadow that couldn't be seen clearly. Is it Yan Ruyu and Yan Song teaming up? On second thought, it's not quite right. It's impossible for Silver to leave the mansion quietly, and it's also impossible for Yan Song to lead a team to steal the house, nor is it possible to operate secretly. Changhe pondered and said, change the plan and follow the team. Jin Ding, go ahead and handle it. Yes. As he spoke, Yan Ruyu had already forced Wan Xianzhao to apologize, and the second young master also brought back some food to appease him. Changhe's eyes were slightly cold as he turned to look at the nearby forest. Gongzi brought back a bowl of bland broth, with a cloudy color and a few slices of fat floating around. It was already a bit cold, emitting a fishy smell. They have never eaten this kind of food before, but at this moment they are very hungry and nothing else. He greeted the grand lady, Changhe, and Wan Xianzhao, but did not mention their appearance as Jade. The second wife leaned over and said, oh, the broth, does it cost a lot of money? Sister-in-law, it seems that you still have the ability to carry it. You can't go hungry without it from your mother's family. Auntie, my mother doesn't have a family, but she has a son like me, said the second prince coldly. I can take care of my mother and younger brother myself, so you don't have to worry. Okay, I'm not worried. When will it be my turn to worry about this matter with the Huo family? However, sister.in.law and second nephew, do you have meat soup? Should we first show filial piety and respect to the old master? He doesn't have soup to drink at home. Madame lowered her eyes and said, I see you just ate some dry food. We are still hungry here, and Hunger is still young. Hunger is still young, how much can he eat? Besides, when he eats good food, he's at the back. How can he argue with the old master? As soon as the second lady finished speaking, Yan Ruyu shouted to the deaf old man leaning against the tree, Uncle. Your daughter.in.law curses you to death. Madame Eyre widened her eyes and said, What are you talking nonsense about? When did I say that? What you just said is that when Hunger eats good food, we are at the back and shouldn't argue with your husband. Does that mean that your husband is dying soon and will not live for a few days, afraid that he won't be able to eat in the future? The old man opened his eyes and his gaze was unfriendly, saying, Shut up. The second lady became angry and embarrassed, and with a flick of the bundle in her hand, several round and chubby buns rolled out. Oh, what is this? Yan Ruyu shouted, Baozi, second madam, you have so many Baozi. Uncle, are you full? Madame Eyre hurriedly picked it up and said, No, I only have 2 of them in total. As a few people gathered around the second room, Yan Ruyu sneered and turned to walk towards the forest. She doesn't drink the fishy broth. In the small forest, seeing no one on either side, he sat down against the tree and consciousness entered the space. She couldn't delay for too long. She took a few bites and also took out 2 meat buns and a live chicken. As she was about to turn back, she suddenly heard some movement not far away. She held a chicken in one hand and a dagger in the other, like an agile leopard, popping up in an instant. A flash of knife light illuminated the person across from him. It's you. Yan Ruyu's eyes narrowed slightly. What are you doing here? Changhe's face showed just the right shock and fear, and he raised the rabbit in his hand. Yan Ruyu confiscated the knife and said, Who are you? I am the nephew of the accountant. Nephew. You're not from the Huo family. When you see exile, why don't you run away and come closer? My parents passed away early, and my uncle, like my father, is getting older. I can't leave him alone. I was originally planning to go out and explore, and the man has aspirations everywhere. Wherever he goes, it's the same. I can also make a living in the northwest. Yan Ruyu pursed her lips and remained silent, her gaze brushing over the dead rabbit. A small hole had been pierced through its neck, fatal in one fell swoop. The man in front of him is unarmed and without weapons. What's your name? Changhe smiled and said, I. Oh, I remember my mother said, there seems to be a nephew named Beiji in the accounting room. Changhe. Is that you? Yan Ruyu frowned slightly and scrutinized her gaze. No, Changhe said calmly, I am his elder brother. Yan Ruyu nodded slightly and said, Okay, you go. And you. Let me see if there's anything else. Changhe left, his eyes as cold as jade. He carefully observed the grass on the ground and quickly found a small patch of blood following the traces of being stepped on. There is also a branch stained with blood. Yan Ruyu twisted the branches and turned her head to see the direction Changhe was leaving. Changhe's smile dissipated as he turned around. Although shocked, he had to admit that at the first moment when his eyes met Yan Ruyu's, he saw a murderous aura. It seems that the Yan family's temporary change of daughter to marry into the royal family is not just a fear of being implicated. Yan Ruyu remained silent and returned to her resting place with the chicken in hand. Changhe whispered, Sister-in-law, where have you been? Mother has left soup for you. No, there's still some soup and a piece of fat in the bowl. Madame Huo felt a bit embarrassed and said, I have wronged you. Newlyweds are usually disturbed early in the morning and don't eat much all day. I'm sure Yan Ruyu is the same, but right now, it's okay. Yan Ruyu was about to bring the bowl over when Wan Xianzhao tilted her head with her hand. The little maid went to help her and accidentally kicked over the soup bowl. The only remaining bite of soup is gone. Madame Huo's face changed slightly, and Wan Xianzhao's small face turned pale. She urgently said, Oh, how good is this? The second young master frowned and said, It's just a sip of soup. After all, drinking it won't be of much use. I don't think she wants to drink it either. Besides, I didn't want to change her share when I changed. If it weren't for my mother's request, I wouldn't have kept it for her. Second cousin, stop talking, it's all my fault. Don't say that again. Mrs. Huo lowered her face. We're all a family. Why do we keep saying these hurtful things? If your older brother is here, he won't agree, mother. That's okay, Yan Ruyu spoke slowly. My things don't belong to you either. She brought the chicken in front of her and, in front of them, stared at the second young master and the master and servant of Wan Xianzhao, twisting the chicken's neck. Wan Xianzhao's face turned white, this time it was really white. Hengner, I'll roast chicken for you to eat. Huo Changheng's big eyes flickered and he said, Does sister.in.law still know how to roast chicken? Of course, only young gentlemen who have their own appearance will exchange things for food. Yan Ruyu skillfully picked up the chicken with a dagger, and with a single strike, goosebumps appeared on the people around her. They are all noble people, they only know that chicken is delicious, how have they ever handled it like this? Huo Changhe handed over the rabbit to his subordinates to collect, and originally planned to quietly send some to his mother and younger brother. Now there's no need. Keep an eye on her and see what she really wants to do. Yes. Yan Ruyu quickly roasted the chicken before turning off the heat, and then took out the meat buns to grill. Mother, Hengner, one for each of you. Sister-in-law, you're amazing. Huo Changheng swallowed his saliva, but I'll leave it for you to eat. You didn't drink the soup just now. When I was on the street, I bought it out of nowhere. Yan Ruyu handed him the steamed buns. Eat it, I'm here, I can't starve you. After speaking, let's start dividing the chickens. Wan Xianzhao's maid said, Let me do this kind of work, and I will do it too. As soon as she reached out, something flew towards her and hit her mouth. With a loud bang. Chapter 8. I'm bored, shut up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The maid let out a painful cry, covered her mouth with her hand, and blood slowly seeped out from between her fingers. She looked down incredulously, hitting the soup bowl that she had accidentally kicked over just now. The bowl wasn't broken, it was smashed into a hole. One of her front teeth was also shaky, her lips were swollen and torn, painful and disheveled. I was slapped twice by Yan Ruyu just now, my face was swollen, and the slap marks didn't disappear. Now my lips are swollen again, and I almost lost my teeth. You. The maid couldn't bear it anymore and raised her hand to pounce on Yan Ruyu. She's also hungry, so she didn't have her share in the meat soup just now. Now she wants to grab a chicken, even if it's a bone. How could Yan Ruyu let her fight? She easily grabbed her wrist and without hesitation pressed her into the extinguished fire. Although it has been extinguished, the remaining ash is still there, with occasional flashes of red light. Ah! The maid screamed in pain, tears streaming down her face. Wan Xianzhao's face turned pale, but her heart was carefree. Yan Ruyu was fierce and evil, like a yiksha, fight, fight. It's best to make the eldest lady dislike her quickly and take her off. But a maid who can change her appearance like a jade and be tortured by Xiao can also be considered valuable. Release your hand quickly, Wan Xianzhao trembled, Su'er just wants to help, not to grab food. Why do you have to hit hard like this? Her hands will be useless. Second cousin. The second young master regained his composure from surprise and his anger surged up again. Yan Ruyu. Are you crazy? Let go. Yan Ruyu ignored the two of them and looked coldly at the maid. Do you know you're wrong? Do you dare to take action? No, I dare not, I dare not. The maid's face was full of tears and her eyes were frightened. Yan Ruyu finally let go of her and continued to divide the chickens. The second young master looked at the maid's hand and lifted his leg to kick towards the Yan Ruyu chicken, saying, "It's just a chicken. How could you harm others so badly?" Yan Ruyu had sharp eyes and fast hands. She lifted her arm to block his leg, clenched her palm into a fist, and punched the acupoint on his leg. The second young master only felt a tingling sensation in his leg, almost unable to stand steadily and falling. Yan Ruyu slowly stood up with a stern gaze. Just a chicken. Can you catch a chicken? Your esteemed second young master. Don't talk about a chicken, every feather belongs to me. I didn't say, let it move, no one should move, including you. Besides, are you blind? She deliberately kicked over the soup bowl, didn't help when she was working, and wanted to share the chicken when it was cooked, so she also matched it. If you still want to hit me, it's polite of me not to cut off her hand. She looked down and swept towards the legs of the second young master. The second young master felt as if her gaze contained a knife, scraping on her leg. It was even more painful. Wan Xianzhao's tears hung on her eyelashes. Su'er didn't mean to. Yan Ruyu turned her head to look at the maid, her eyebrows slightly raised. The maid shrank and said, "Yes. I did it on purpose. Wan Xianzhao. Those who value themselves should keep their mouths shut." Yan Ruyu glanced at Wan Xianzhao. "Otherwise, if I make a mistake, I will follow suit and be beaten." At this moment, Yan Song came over from the front and said, "What's going on?" "Yan Ruyu, it's you again." Yan Ruyu was too lazy to pay attention to him, so she continued to divide the chickens. Yan Song's gaze flickered slightly and he said coldly, "Listen carefully," set off immediately and hit the road. Everyone exclaimed in surprise and complained everywhere. Yan Song shook his whip and said, "What's the noise? If you have the ability, stand up and say it to my whip." The second young master poked his neck and asked, "It's already late now, why do you have to rush at this time?" "My cousin's foot is still injured." Pop. Before he could finish speaking, Yan Song whipped him in the face. The eldest lady quickly pulled the second young master, but the whip did not hit his face, but it hit his shoulder. The tip of the whip swept over the back of the eldest lady's hand, causing a blood stain. "Mother." Yan Ruyu held the eldest lady's wrist. "Does it hurt a lot?" "It's okay, it doesn't hurt," the lady hissed and held back. The second young master's face turned pale with pain, and his eyes were red as he stared at Yan Song. "You. Second young master, have I ever told you that you are a criminal and I am an official? Remember your identity well, otherwise you will suffer." Yan Song smiled coldly. "Be agile in your legs and feet. Hurry up, and if you behave well, rest ahead." The second young master still wanted to refute, but Yan Ruyu sneered, "If you don't have the ability to kill your opponent with one blow, just shut your mouth. Just arguing with your mouth and causing trouble to your family is a reckless man." The second young master glared angrily, and Wan Xianzhao was so heartbroken that she burst into tears. "Second cousin, are you okay? Does it hurt?" "It's okay, this little injury doesn't matter." The second young master gritted his teeth and endured the pain. "You don't hurt, my mother hurts," Yan Ruyu said rudely, turning her head to look at Wan Xianzhao. "And you, cry to the side, don't get in my way here." Yan Ruyu supported the eldest lady on the road, with Hua Changhe following beside him, nervously watching her. "Mother is fine, don't worry," the eldest lady forced a smile and touched his head. Hua Changhe mingled with the crowd and followed behind them. "Master, madam is injured. I still have some medicine here." Changhe's gaze shifted away from Madame and locked onto Yan Ruyu, saying, let's take a look. When that woman is not around, let's talk about it. Yes. Changhe said to the accountant, go ahead and tell me that you stole the silver bill before leaving and handed it to your mother. Yes. He looked into the distance, and this road was familiar to him. A dozen miles further on, there were several estates that belonged to the wealthy families in the city. The estate of the Wing King is located within it. Jin Ding, Changhe whispered, do you have a copy of the terrain map of the Wing King Manor? The slender guard nodded and said, Master, here you are. Later, let's see where the team stops. If it's near the Wing King Manor, take it out and take a look. Yes. The sky and earth were pitch black, and the stars on the horizon were hidden in the clouds, with only a few soldiers holding torches emitting a faint light. Everyone had deep and shallow feet, and the sound of falling could not be ignored. I have been walking for a whole day, and I have never sat in a carriage for such a long time before. At this moment, I feel my legs stiff, my feet blistered, and the pain is unbearable. I don't know who was sobbing softly, spreading layer by layer, causing many people to start crying along. The only son of the second wife is in the third generation, only 1 month younger than the second young master. He has always been pampered and has a delicate and expensive body. At this moment, he feels pain all over his bones, and his irritability rushes straight to the forehead. It's all your fault. He turned around angrily. If it weren't for your big house causing trouble, I would be fine in the mansion now. I can take the imperial examination next spring and honor my ancestors. It's all ruined now. The eldest lady pursed her lips tightly and remained silent. The second young master couldn't help but retort, Big brother has been wronged. When he comes back, everything will be fine. Coming back. Will he still come back? I see, he's either dead or hiding. He's lucky. He caused trouble and ran quickly, which implicated us. The third young master looked at his hands and said, Unfortunately, Unfortunately, you won't be able to touch the woman in the brothel anymore. Yan Ruyu's voice forcefully joined in. The third young master looked at her in shock and said, What are you talking about? It's simply unreasonable, it's insulting to be refined. The second young master also frowned and said, How could you say such things? Yan Ruyu's eyes swept over him and said, Shut up, you can't argue to the point, it's not embarrassing. If my husband doesn't make great achievements, where are you staying in the mansion? Are you not allowed to follow your parents and grandfather in the countryside, digging and eating in the soil? Return to Sangongzi, when others call you, dog 3 leftovers, it's almost the same. Have you passed all the previous exams in the imperial examination? Just take the imperial examination when you come up. Why don't you go directly to the emperor to get an official position? Just your virtue, even if you become a eunuch for the emperor in your own palace, no one would want you. What did you say about you? Second lady was angry, it's simply. Yan Ruyu's fingers flickered with a cold light as she said, I'm annoyed. I've closed my mouth. Who dares to say that my husband is not right anymore? I cut his tongue. Chapter 9. Taking without discussion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The people in the second room dared not speak up when they saw the dagger in Yan Ruyu's hand and remembered the ferocity of her cleaning up the chicken. Yan Ruyu ignored their gaze and took out the chicken that had just been bone removed, handing Changhe a chicken leg. Eat it. Changhe's eyes were bright, he looked at Yan Ruyu and then at Madame. Mother and sister. Law eat. Yan Ruyu hooked her lips and stuffed the other chicken leg into the lady's hand, saying, Mother also eats it. Madame wanted to decline, but Yan Ruyu said again, eating is the key to gaining strength. Her tone was firm, and the lady nodded slowly, gripping the chicken leg tightly and saying, Okay. The eldest lady glanced at her second son and wanted to give him some, but felt it was not appropriate. Madame Air smelled the aroma and her saliva surged in her mouth. She said with jealousy, "Sister-in-law, the old master didn't even touch meat today. Can you eat it too?" Madame slowly took a bite and said, Ruyu's craftsmanship is good, it's a bit more fragrant than Baozi. The second lady wanted to say more, but caught a glimpse of the knife in Yan Ruyu's hand and let go of the conversation. Changhe walked with his short legs to the side of second young master and said, "Second brother, do you still feel pain? Take a bite." How embarrassed is he to eat? Yan Ruyu's voice was as cold as a knife. Just now he had to kick away, didn't he? It's just a chicken. The second young master's face turned pale and blue, and he turned his face and snorted, "I won't eat." Qianzhao's stomach was growling with hunger, and he wanted to coax the second young master to order chicken from Yan Ruyu. Seeing this scene, he was really angry and heartbroken. Yan Ruyu still looked at her, her lips covered in oil, and the aroma of chicken was strong. Her heart hurt even more. After a difficult journey, I can finally stop. Everyone was about to collapse, swaying and swaying, with no trace of the former nobility. This road is nothing to Yan Ruyu, she always remains vigilant. Yan Song suddenly made his way again and stopped here. He must have had some ulterior motives. Looking into the distance, there were shadows and shadows, as if there were many buildings. What is this place? She appeared calm on the surface, secretly paying attention to Yan Song's movements. "Mother, how are your hands?" Madame shook her head and said, "It's okay, don't worry. You must be exhausted too. Hurry up and rest." Changhe pulled the grass under his body and said, "Sister-in-law, sit here, it's soft here." Yan Ruyu touched his head and said, "I'm not tired. You can take a nap, mother. I'll go find some herbs and apply them to you. The wound will heal quickly." Madame quickly grabbed her and said, "No need, you've been tired all day too. My injury doesn't matter, it'll be fine tomorrow." "Mother," said the second young master, "if she wants to go, let her go. It's just right for her to bring some medicine for Qianzhao." Qianzhao's eyes were red and he said, "No need, second cousin, it's okay with me." "It doesn't matter to me whether you're important or not," Yan Ruyu interrupted her. "Second young master, I'm taking care of my mother and showing filial piety for my husband and your elder brother. I'm not your servant." As the words fell, Yan Ruyu strode away. They were resting on the roadside, not far away there were bushes and wildflowers, and the soldiers were also tired. Even if they saw her, they ignored her. A weak woman, it's impossible for her to run, and besides, her family is still there. Yan Ruyu went to the hiding place, looked left and right without anyone, and consciousness entered the space. At that time, the delivery was too urgent and the mess was not cleaned up. I also didn't remember where I received some topical medicine. If she can't find it, she'll have to use the modern medicine she saved up before, just make up a statement. I found the medicine and suddenly heard a gentle sound of footsteps. Yan Ruyu held her breath and listened for a while, but it came from a nearby road. She quietly walked forward, through the weeds, and indeed saw someone quietly leaving the team. Yan Song. Yan Ruyu's eyes narrowed slightly, catching up without hesitation. After about 15 minutes, Yan Song stopped under a large mulberry tree, clasping his hands on his lips and making a few moans. Not long after, a figure flashed from behind the tree. This person is wearing a black cloak, covering their head and face, and their voice is low. Yan Ruyu listened attentively, but the distance was a bit far. They deliberately lowered their voices, unable to hear accurately, only vaguely hearing words like Wing King and Villa. Yan Ruyu's eyes lit up, and as she looked at the nearby building, could it be the estate of the Wing King? Thinking of the previous intention of the servants in the Yuan mansion to use bricks to injure the Grand Lady, and seeing Yan Song sneakily meeting people here, it is believed that Changhe has been framed and must be closely related to the Yuan. Yan Ruyu sneered silently. "Alright, since you've come to Yan, let's let you see and see. What's more Yan? She walked around lightly, silently like a civet cat, and headed straight towards the estate. The walls of the manor were tall, but she couldn't help but look as beautiful as jade. She took out her flying claws and telescopic rope and easily entered. She stood on a tree and looked down from a high place. At this late night, the people in the estate had already fallen asleep. Except for those responsible for patrol and defense. They held torches, lit sparks, and were particularly clear in the night. They looked like jade under a tree and ran straight towards the most tightly guarded area. This is a large warehouse. Half is grain, and the other half contains agricultural products produced on the farm. The manors near the suburbs have beautiful scenery and fertile land, and the income here is generally an important factor. Yan Ruyu hung from the top to the bottom of the roof at the back window, using a special tool to remove the wooden window and jump in 3 or 2 times. There is really a lot of grain here. Yan Ruyu has spent nearly a stick of incense, as well as various agricultural products and seeds, but none of them have been left. The vast granary was empty, and Yan Ruyu didn't turn her head back. She followed the original path, restored the windows to their original state, and jumped onto the roof. Just as she was about to leave, she glanced and saw a small house separated from the granary wall. There are no lights in the cabin, it is dark and heavy like a dormant beast. The agent's intuition made Gu Ruyu feel that this cabin was extraordinary. The torches of the patrol team below swayed back and forth, reflecting Yan Ruyu's pitch-black eyes. Her mind suddenly moved. Is it possible that these people are guarding this warehouse on the surface, but in reality it is this small house? To cover it up, this kind of thing, as beautiful as jade, has not been encountered before. She took out a monkey face mask from the space, put it on, went down to the roof, and waited for an opportunity to enter the cabin. To her surprise, the furnishings in the room were extremely simple, almost empty, with no valuable items. Yan Ruyu didn't give up, she believed in her intuition. Tap your toes lightly, as if stepping on something. She lowered her head and picked up a grain of polished rice. The quality of this rice is much better than that in the warehouse just now. Under the moonlight, Yan Ruyu quickly observed the ground and found a tile that was smoother than the others. With a palm clap, the floor tiles moved, revealing a mechanism. She reached out and pulled up the opposite wall, silently withdrawing, revealing a hidden door. As expected, Yan Ruyu walked into the secret door and passed through a short passage, creating a dark room. I had seen the granary just now, but Yan Ruyu was still surprised by this underground darkroom. The piles of grain bags are more than twice as large as before, not only the grain, but also a large number of boxes of gold and silver ingots, as well as boxes with seals attached. Yan Ruyu tore open one of them, opened it, and her eyes suddenly shrank. Chapter 10. Giving a Small Gift. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What is inside the box is made of refined iron. The refined iron of this era is all in the hands of the state. Anyone who privately hoards iron or weapons is considered a major crime and may be suspected of plotting rebellion. Yan Ruyu's mind was spinning. The king of Zhenan, Changhe, was framed, claiming to be plotting rebellion. But now that the Wing King's warehouse contains not only a large amount of grain, gold and silver, but also so much iron, who is the one who intends to rebel? Unfortunately, the charges have now been pinned on Changhe's head, and he is nowhere to be found. With her alone efforts, not to mention overturning the case, it is even difficult to see the face of the Dog Emperor. Yan Ruyu quickly calmed down, took all these things away first, and in the future, when she saw Changhe, she would consider it in the long run. Make up your mind and start working. When I came out of the cabin, it had been almost half an hour, and before I left, I still put a small gift inside. She wants to go to places like study to see if there is any other evidence. As I passed by a courtyard, I suddenly smelled a faint fragrance. Yan Ruyu has been very sensitive to fragrance since childhood. In her spare time doing tasks, her favorite thing besides making delicious food is making incense. She searched for the scent and found a sachet at the corner of the yard door. Whether it's the style of the sachet or the taste inside, it makes Yan Ruyu's heart tense. An emotion from the original owner. This is Miss Yan's belongings. Strange, how could it be here? She turned over and entered the hospital, with the lights still on in the room. She went to the back window and broke the window paper to look inside. A woman wearing thin gauze, with fragrant shoulders half covered and half exposed, is leaning against a man, holding a wine cup in her hand and feeding him a drink. Miss Yan. Yan Ruyu's eyes widened slightly, and upon closer inspection of the man, it was none other than the Wing King. She suddenly realized that no wonder Miss Yan refused to marry Changhe. It turned out that it was not only because she heard that the Jinan prince's mansion was going to suffer a disaster, but also because she had already colluded with the Wing King. Haha. Prince, congratulations to the prince on getting rid of his serious illness. Miss Yan was delicate and charming, with her eyebrows and eyes full of charm. The Wing King was a bit intoxicated and drank the wine in her hand. You're still the best. Wait. Wang stood up and took out a pair of jade bracelets from a small box on the table, putting them in her hand. Thank you very much, Prince. I'll toast you again. King Yi squinted his eyes and looked at her. I found out today that you look very beautiful with no makeup. Miss Yan's smile stiffened imperceptibly, and she immediately leaned against his chest in a coquettish manner. She didn't want to be so simple either. She was accustomed to wealth and status, but for some reason, all the jewelry and clothes in her room were gone. No, not only jewelry and clothing, but also silver bills and antique ornaments, regardless of their value, are gone. Just like a locust passing through and being completely stolen, she almost doubted that if it weren't for the heavy bed, the thief wouldn't even leave it for her. Not only her yard, but also her mother's yard. She was stunned at the time and immediately searched for the thief, the maid in the yard, and several servants outside the yard who had been killed, but there was no clue at all. If she hadn't been in a hurry to leave the city and meet the King of Wings, and didn't have the money to buy a new one right away, she wouldn't have been in a hurry and appeared in this outfit. She lightly caressed the jade bracelet with her fingers, feeling a bitterness in her heart. It was unbelievable that she was already penniless, and this jade bracelet was her most valuable thing now. Prince, my father specifically requested today that my brother.in.law be responsible for escorting the people from the Jinan prince's mansion. Now, do you believe he is on your side? The Winged King lightly turned his wine glass and muttered to himself, I have given Changhe a chance, but he must stand on the side of the crown prince. He is just a king with a different surname. This king is the biological son of his father, how can we let him pass? Since he doesn't appreciate it, what this king can't get, the crown prince can't expect it either. After drinking the wine, my finger hooked onto Miss Yan's chin and said, even if I don't believe in your father, I still believe in you. Don't worry, for your sake, we won't treat you unfairly. Prince. Yan Ruyu felt a chill and turned her head to look in the direction of the cabin. Calculating the time, it's about time. At this moment, a burst of flames suddenly broke out in the darkness. Yan Ruyu's lips slightly curled up. When she left just now, she placed a miniature bomb on the door of the darkroom. The sound was not too loud, but it was enough to burn the cabin into flames. The Wing King in the room paused and said, what noise? Before the words could be finished, someone hurriedly rushed to the courtyard and loudly said, Prince, it's not good, it's gone into the water. The Winged King didn't take it lightly and said, just go out and put out the fire. What are you looking for me to do? Are you still asking me to put out the fire? Returning to the prince, it's over there in the granary. The Winged King suddenly woke up, pushed aside Miss Yan, and suddenly stood up, following the guard towards the fire. Changhe, who had not yet arrived at the granary, paused in his footsteps and looked up at the direction of the flames soaring into the sky. He asked the guard beside him, "What is that place?" "Master, according to the map, it's the location of the granary." "How did it catch fire? Did the Wing King know that we were investigating him?" Changhe gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go take a look." He had just stood at the treetop hiding his figure when he saw the Winged King rushing over. "The fire has spread like wildfire, and the warehouse is also on fire." The eyes of the King of Wings were flushed with fire and he said, "Hurry up and put out the fire, save the food." "Lord Hui, there is no grain in the granary." Not only King Yi, but also Changhe on the tree was stunned for a moment. "What did you say? Say it again." "Prince, it's true. There's no food inside," the guard pursed his lips. "It's empty. This is simply a repair." The King of Wings pulled out his waist knife and wiped it on his neck. Blood splattered on the Winged King's face, and he glared angrily at the burning grain depot. The half-burned door collapsed with a loud bang. Inside, it is indeed empty. Changhe frowned slightly and turned his head to command, "Let's go somewhere else." Miss Yan saw that the Wing King had left and there was no one around. She quietly went to the table and looked into the small box. Inside are all jewels, shining brightly. She couldn't help her heart racing and had always loved these precious things, especially now. If you pick up one or two items, the Wing King probably won't notice, right? As soon as my hand reached out, I hadn't even reached the edge of the box when the door was pushed open with a loud bang. She was startled, thinking that the Wing King would come back, and quickly stiffened into a playful posture. But it's not the Wing King who came. The person who entered the room first turned off the lights, and in a blink of an eye, they only saw a mask on, resembling a strange monkey face. Miss Yan was so scared that her mind went blank. She even forgot to scream, and the person's voice became muffled and deep. "You're laughing so disgustingly." Next, there was a head-to-face beating. Yan Ruyu's emotions were intense, stemming from the resentment and anger of the original owner. The biological mother of the original owner was not Yan Shuang's concubine at all, but his original wife in the countryside. He rushed to achieve fame and fortune, but abandoned his wife who was worthless and married a new wife. The birth mother of the original owner became an extramarital for no apparent reason, and it was only after several years of traveling to Beijing to find someone that she discovered. But everything is already too late. She has a strong-willed personality and refuses to enter the mansion or seek compensation. As long as it is fair, she was deceived into entering the mansion by Lady Yan and died a tragic assassination. Poor original owner has become an illegitimate daughter, not as good as Miss Yan's maid. "Who are you?" "Ah." Miss Yan fled in distress, "Help." Yan Ruyu remained silent, with every slap accurately hitting her face. Forced to kneel, needle pricks, forced to eat dog food, broken arms, pushed into the lake in winter one by one, they were all slapped in the face, enjoying themselves thoroughly. Let you bully people based on your legitimate identity, today I'll let you know how powerful. Yan Ruyu growled in her ear and knocked her unconscious. Before leaving, he looted the room and found a jade pendant from the space, throwing it under the corner of the bed. Half hidden and half exposed. As soon as she was discharged from the hospital, she ran into a shadow in front of her. As soon as she saw someone's movements, she knew it was not a good move, so she drew a dagger and attacked.